go ahead and I'll share my screen and we'll go through the same PowerPoint with the arteries. There will be some changes as I go through the hit list for your arteries. Most notably, right away, I can tell you that the maxillary artery is not tagged, so you can cross that off your list. And the saphenous artery is also not going to be tagged, so you can cross that one off your list. And the transverse scapular is a cat artery, so that one can be crossed off your list as well. And then as I keep going through, we'll put one in the bathroom, but that'll probably lead to barking. Okay. Okay, so our first picture here, there is an artery you're going to have to add, and that is the facial artery. And no shock there, it's going to be traveling with the facial vein. I suspect many of you have not started studying your blood vessels because you've been focused on today's exam. But here is the facial artery. And that would be the right facial artery. And obviously you're going to have to pay attention to right versus left. And then it's difficult to see, but this red one going underneath the mandible, it's actually going to the tongue. That would be the right lingual artery. And I have another picture to show you of it more up close. And then this part right here is the ascending aorta. And where it turns, this part where it turns, is the aortic arch. Shown in blue, remember, a blue color does not guarantee that it's a vein. The definition of a vein is a vessel that returns blood toward the heart. The definition of a vein is not whether it carries oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood. So in this case, for the pulmonary circuit, those blue vessels are branches of the pulmonary arteries. So that would be the left that I pointed to, and over here would be the right. Remember, it's the person's right anatomical position. Okay, and then up here, this would be the right subclavian artery. It's difficult for us to tell that because we're missing the clavicle, and by definition, the subclavian artery goes underneath the clavicle, hence the term subclavian. And over here would be the left. And then pretty high up, it turns into the axillary artery. And then after that would be the brachial. Obviously, everything on this side is the left. So there are a lot of blood vessels that can be tagged on this picture of this model. This right here, this red artery there, would be the right common carotid. And over here would be the left common carotid. We're going to get to another model, specifically a heart model, where I can show you the three branches coming off the aortic arch. There's one, there's two, there's three. Obviously, this is not the right picture of the correct model to show you those three branches because it's kind of a far view and we can't really see them. and determine our anatomical landmarks. So tagging those 3 branches close to the aortic arch like that would not be a fair tag. Okay, now we're down near the pelvic region. We can see the descending abdominal aorta. And we do need to be specific. So there's the ascending aorta, there's the aortic arch, there's the descending thoracic aorta, which would clearly be superior of the diaphragm. And you should also make a note down here. It's the last vessel, the abdominal aorta. Some students also call it the descending abdominal aorta because it is carrying blood down the torso of the body. So here is again the descending abdominal aorta, or you could just say abdominal aorta. It branches into the common iliac. And clearly on that side, it would be the left. And then I'm just going to abbreviate over here, the right common iliac. And then as we saw with the veins, we're going to have the left external iliac. And this will be better over here, right external iliac. And then the 2 that are going inside here would be the right and left internal iliac. And I will be posting both my veins notes and my artery notes, PowerPoints, under our lab unit 3, should you want them. The middle vessel here, let me change my color. This middle vessel here is the mid-sacral artery. And that is on your hit list. It's the second to the last in case you're looking for it. So it's this one right here that I'm pointing to in green. And as we saw last week, when the external iliac arteries go underneath your inguinal ligament and they reach the surface of your thigh, it turns into the femoral artery. And as I mentioned last week on this model on the right-hand side, they have cut away the right femoral artery to show you vessels that are deeper, most notably the deep femoral artery, which I will point to using, let's use purple. So the deep femoral artery would be that branch right there, right deep femoral artery. And I have another picture of that, a more up close picture that I can show you, and specifically right here, that would be the left deep femoral artery. And then here is the left femoral artery. Okay. Over here, again, I can see common iliac and external iliac. And then this one going into the pelvic bowl, whereas I am running out of space, internal iliac. Lots that can be tagged on that picture, or pictures, plural. Here we go back to our face. Again, the only one that you can see clearly and would be a fair tag would be your facial artery. And it's right next to the facial vein. These branches in here, I would not tag them on this model so far away and without being able to see better landmarks, but those are blood vessels that are on your hit list, and I will point them out when I get to a better model to demonstrate those. But from here too far away. Most notably, this little branch right there would be the lingual. And again, in my opinion, not a fair tag because we're not close enough and we don't see enough of our anatomical landmarks. But here's a better one. Oh, you know what? Sorry. Strike that. I need to make a correction. Yes, maxillary artery is, put it back on your list. Sorry about that. I forgot that I had found this model. Maxillary artery, put it back on your list. Here it is. That is the left maxillary artery. I forgot that I had found one where they cut away the mandible so you can see the maxillary artery. It's deep to the mandible. And here is our left facial. And I'm going to trade, it's weird. It's really weird. So see this, I'm coloring it in purple. That branch goes up and under the bone and comes back up. So all of that I just colored in purple is the left facial artery. This branch, this little one coming off, is the left lingual. And then, again, difficult to see for our landmarks, but these are the two branches. They're going to be the external and internal carotid arteries. I would not tag them there, even though the left lingual and left facial artery come off of the external carotid. The internal carotid is just to the right of it, but there is a better model for me to tag those on. Okay, so here is a better example of that. So here is the right external carotid artery. And here is the right internal carotid artery. And again, you can see that weird facial artery coming out, going underneath the mandible, then peeking out before it goes very superficial along the face. And then the lingual would be this tiny branch there, going over here to the underside of the tongue. So, sorry, right lingual. Erase that and redraw it. Okay. Now here, I think, is the better model to tag quite a few of those structures that I was just talking about with the common carotid, external carotid, and internal carotid, as well as facial and lingual. So down here, first of all, let me draw it this way, and we're seeing the left side of the person's face. This is the left common carotid. Okay, and then this one over here, if you follow it, I'll draw it with my purple. You follow it, it's going into that carotid foramen that you learned about back in lab unit 1. Weren't those simple days? I bet you missed those bones tests now, don't you? So that would be the left internal carotid artery. Then here is a right internal carotid artery. Oh, sorry. What am I doing? I'm not paying attention. Obviously, that would be external. I started having a party in my head. And again, we can see the first two branches that are coming off of that external carotid artery that are going towards the face region. So this one, the more inferior one there, would be the left lingual, not fingual, honestly. Left lingual. And then this one is the left facial. And again, it goes underneath the mandible for a while before it peaks back out. So all of that would be the left facial, even here. And then we're seeing a little bit of that maxillary. So again, put maxillary artery back on your list. Left maxillary. Now, if you look here, all of these vertebrae are cervical vertebrae. And if you remember from your lab unit 1, the cervical vertebrae have a transverse foramen. And through that transverse foramen, a blood vessel travels through it. And that is your left vertebral artery. So I think that is a really good model to tag the common carotid with the external and internal clearly branching off of it. And from the external, you can see the lingual and the facial, and then higher up going under the mandible, we can see the maxillary artery. Traveling through the transverse foramen, we can see the vertebral artery. We're going to head back down to the abdominal cavity now. And let's get our visuals here. First of all, that would be the left common iliac artery. And obviously this would be the right common iliac. This little nub right here, because they've cut it off so that you can see everything, because it would be coming out of the picture. It would be going anteriorly from the person's abdomen. That is the inferior mesenteric artery. And then just above it, we see the left gonadal artery. And here would be the right gonadal. I'm not going to keep writing artery because we're doing arteries today. I think that's just silly and taking up time. Here we're seeing the left renal artery. And over here, we're seeing the right renal artery. And we're not really seeing a good picture of the suprarenal arteries, but they would be there. I mean, we learned last week that that blue one, this blue vessel here, was a suprarenal vein. Well, there would also be a suprarenal artery. And it's not on your hit list, at least that's what I'm seeing, but it should be. It should be. The suprarenal arteries should be there. They do exist. This is, again, a little nub. It would be coming out at you. That would be the celiac trunk. The word trunk is a term for an artery that is going to branch, just like a tree trunk has branches coming from it. So if you put celiac artery instead of celiac trunk, you would not be marked wrong. But I just want you to know a trunk is an anatomist word to say that other blood vessels are going to branch from it. And in another picture, I am going to show you that 3 branches come off of the celiac trunk, and they are the splenic, the gastric, and the hepatic artery. And we have a really good set of pictures to show you those three branches coming off the celiac trunk. And this nub, again, coming out at you, it's 3D, so it'd be coming anteriorly. That is the superior mesenteric artery. Okay, so that's what I can tag there. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions. We only have half of us here together today, but I did say it was optional. Again, we're seeing the abdominal cavity. Let me point out, here is the left common iliac. That would be the left external iliac. That little branch there would be the left internal. And of course, same thing would be on the right. Here is the mid-sacral artery. And now let's work our way up. Here is the inferior mesenteric. Here's the left gonadal. There's the right gonadal. This large blood vessel, of course, is the abdominal or descending abdominal aorta. We are seeing, oh, that crossed my lines. Let's do that separately so we don't get confused. There we go. And then up here, we can see the left renal and right renal. Please remember, this structure is the spleen. This little nub coming out at you is the superior mesenteric. And then the next, let me make that circle smaller. This little nub coming out at you is the celiac trunk. And on this model, we can see all three branches that come off of it. This one going up where you're not seeing it, the stomach would be right here. So that's the gastric. This one going to the spleen would be the splenic. And then this one going up to the liver would be the hepatic. Again, three branches off the celiac trunk. One going to the stomach, gastric, one going to the spleen, splenic, and one going to the liver, hepatic. Okay, again, on this picture, we can see pulmonary artery. And that would be left. And of course, we can see the one on the right. Okay. Getting to our heart model where we can easily see the ascending aorta. Here is the aortic arch. And the first branch off the aortic arch would be the right brachiocephalic. Last week when we learned about the veins, there was a right and a left brachiocephalic vein. For arteries, we only have a right brachiocephalic vein, and right brachiocephalic artery, and it branches into the right common carotid artery and the right subclavian. But off the aortic arch, for the left side, we don't have a left brachiocephalic artery. We have the left common carotid and the left subclavian, which once it goes underneath the clavicle and exits from underneath the clavicle, turns into the axillary artery. Because I didn't put my slides in order in the first place, we're hopscotching around. And we're right back down into the abdominal cavity. Here is our abdominal aorta. Here is our left and right common carotid. Here is our superior mesenteric artery. And mesenteric, mesentery means intestines. So it's basically serving nutrition and oxygen-rich blood to the small intestine. Coming out at you right here is that celiac trunk. This branch here is the hepatic artery. And here is the splenic. And this model had a stomach that can also be hooked on to the model. The stomach part has been taken off, and we're not seeing the gastric artery, but the gastric artery would be going up like this to get to the stomach. But again, on this model, we're not seeing the gastric artery. This is the part of our cartilages of the larynx, obviously. So this is the thyroid cartilage. We have the laryngeal prominence. That's the Adam's apple that everyone thinks is there. So that's just for reference. We're in the throat. I'll just erase that. And right here, we're seeing the left common carotid. I think you can tell we're in the throat region. And here's the right common carotid. Right here, we can see the left subclavian. I can color it in, and actually I can see it start to branch off the aortic arch down here. And then this right here is the right brachiocephalic artery. Again, there is not a left brachiocephalic artery. It branches into the right common carotid and then the right subclavian. I'm going to save this before I lose it. Probably a good idea because I was noticing my computer starting to act up. So I don't want to lose everything that I've annotated. There we go. Okay. And we've seen this model already. Now we're just a little bit more up close. So here is the left femoral artery. And again, on this side of this model, the right femoral artery has been cut away, so we can see deeper vessels below it, most notably the right deep femoral. And I have another picture of the deep femoral. So here is the right femoral. Again, it was cut away from the other part, which is up here. So I could kind of color that in if you want me to. That would be the connection. Up here, we have the left external iliac. It turns into the femoral once it crosses the inguinal ligament, which would be right about there. And once that vessel is now very superficial on the anterior thigh, it would be the femoral artery. And then we can see the midsacral. And then that little red one inside there would be the left internal iliac. Okay, and then any vessel that you see going towards the knee, you would say it's the popliteal. And I'm going to show you another picture of the popliteal, but that would be the popliteal artery. On this model, it would be the right. Very next slide, I'm showing you the back. And again, this is the back of someone's left leg. How do I know that? That's the gracilis, which is an inner thigh muscle. So this arrow here is pointing to the left popliteal artery. Because it's going behind the knee. Again, on this model, you would tag it there. So that would be the right popliteal. If you see a blood vessel on the back of the knee, it's popliteal. That's what we want you to know. Okay. And last week, I used this model to show you the intercostal vessels, and I asked you to add that to your hit list. And I said, because of the picture and how close the artery and vein are, I said, if they are tagged, you just call them intercostal vessels. And specifically on this picture, they would be the left intercostal vessels. There would be another set on the right side of this model as well. And again, we can see abdominal aorta. We can see the common iliacs. I can see external iliac. And on that side, it would be right. And here is the right internal. No.
Just watch.
And way up here, this little nub is actually the celiac trunk again. And you can see a branch coming off there, and that would represent the hepatic artery. Just pointing it out, I think the other models that I showed you already that are more up close are better representatives of those vessels, and that's where I would likely tag them because it's up close and you can definitely see your landmarks. But I'm just pointing it out on this one because even from far away, I can still see it and I can point it out. So I'm just pointing it out on this model. I mean, I can even point out that tiny little piece there, which would be the right renal. we have seen this model before, but on this slide, it's tagged for you. It's just a nice review. We can see the external carotid artery, the internal carotid artery going up, and you got to follow it. You got to follow it up. See how it's entering the skull? It's going through the carotid foramen. The other model, though, I thought did a better job showing us the two branches coming off the external carotid artery, which were the facial, the lingual, and then the facial. This one, because the perspective of how the picture is taken, notice it's more anterior than the other one. We don't see those branches as well. So here is your facial artery. And that would be left. And then right here would be your maxillary artery. And just for perspective, I'll jump back to that other model. So again, here is our external on the left side, slightly different model, and on the right side, we're seeing our internal carotid artery, and we can follow it all the way up into that carotid foramen. And the external carotid artery has those two branches that I just told you about, the inferior one being the lingual, and then the more superior of the two being the facial. And then again, we can still see the vertebral artery traveling through those transverse foramen, and then the common carotid artery. Here is a liver model. We're looking at the underside of the liver. Last week, we learned about the inferior vena cava, and then we also learned about the hepatic portal system. But here is the hepatic artery, a branch coming off the celiac trunk. Just a few more slides. So again, coming out here, this little area, that's the celiac trunk. And I'm going to highlight in blue, this area here is the stomach. And you can see there's a tiny little artery shown on that model going to the stomach. So that would be the gastric. And then this one going to the spleen. So here's the spleen, not the kidney. That's the splenic artery. And then this one going into the liver, of course, is the hepatic. And then down here, we can see the superior mesenteric artery. Okay, now this is another good model. Here is the celiac trunk. Nope, sorry, scratch that. Nope, different model. So you're not seeing the celiac trunk, rather you're seeing branches of the celiac trunk. So that one is the hepatic going up to the liver. So let's pretend, let me pretend the liver is right here with the big left lobe. Hold on a minute. My PowerPoint is freezing and it's thinking. There we go. So there would be the left lobe, and then here's the right lobe of the liver. So that would be the hepatic artery going into the liver. Here's our spleen. Again, that artery there would be the splenic. And then right here would be the stomach. So any guesses what that little branch would be? Gastric artery. And then again, here is the superior mesenteric. On the back side of this model, if I could turn her around and show you, we would see those three branches coming off the celiac trunk, but it's hidden by the pancreas. So this structure going across, it looks like it's got a fishbone in it, doesn't it? So all of this is the pancreas. Kind of looks like a cobblestone pathway. So that's the pancreas. Okay, this arrow is showing you the left brachial artery. And up here would be axillary. And this, of course, would be subclavian. It's all on the left side. This would be the right side. We can see gonadal, inferior mesenteric. There is no left or right inferior mesenteric, nor left or right superior mesenteric. Those are unpaired branches. They are singular branches. So that's inferior mesenteric. Here's the other gonadal on the right side. Again, celiac trunk coming out at you. And this nub coming out at you would be superior mesenteric. Okay, we've seen all those before. This picture last week, the golden arrow is pointing to the azygos vein. So that's a vein. We did that last week, but on this picture right here, let me use gold as well. That would be your thoracic, descending thoracic aorta that you can see there. Descending thoracic aorta. Okay, and then again, we can see here, inferior mesenteric. It's kind of busy with all the veins also included. Here's again, left and right. So that would be common iliac. External iliac. Internal iliac. Femoral. And then there's that deep femoral again. Okay. And it's the same picture again. Don't know why I included it twice, but I did. So as I went through the list, it did occur to me that I did forget to tell you to take one off. So again, maxillary should be put back on your list. But the one that I did not tag nor find a good model of is the internal thoracic. Internal thoracic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's number 8 from the top. It's 8 on your list. Internal thoracic. It does exist in humans. It's also called the mammary artery or internal mammary. I just did not find a very good model that showed that. So internal thoracic is one that you can take off of your list. Again, it does exist in humans. It's not a cat-specific vessels. I just was not happy with finding a good representation of it. And then another one, iliolumbar. That is a cat vessel name. We have different equivalents of it. So iliolumbar artery and vein, you can cross those both off. Saphenous artery, you can cross that one off as well. Are there any questions? Because that concludes our arteries for today. Are you good? Yes? No? All right, I'm going to stop recording.